Janet Marsh, and I am the Public Education Specialist at the Office of Utilities Regulation. With me this afternoon are the CEO for the Market Research Services Limited, Kishka K. O'Connor Anderson, and Market Research Services Limited was contracted by the OUR to conduct this mystery shopping survey. We also have joining us today Consumer Affairs Officer at the OUR, who is also the project manager on behalf of the OUR for this mystery shopping exercise, Miss Beverly Green. Ladies, welcome.
Thank you, Liz.
Bev, I'm now going to hand over to you before we go to Kishka K to just give an overview of the mystery shopping exercise conducted by the OUR.
Thank you, Liz. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The Office of Utilities Regulation, again, would like to thank you for coming here this afternoon to share in the findings of the OUR's 2020 Mystery Shopping Survey conducted by Market Research Services Limited. We would like to extend a special welcome to the private service providers who are attending this webinar. The OUR has conducted mystery shopping exercises over the past 3 years. This one was done last year, and we sought to find out how the providers were adjusting throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. We have included the utility providers call center and social media platform into the mix to measure the service their customers were receiving via these channels. Our objectives were to ascertain the level of customer satisfaction provided by Flow, Digicel, NWC, and JPS in store, social media, and via phone, ascertain major areas of satisfaction and dissatisfaction with customer service, and how the areas of dissatisfaction can be improved. We also wanted to find out if there should be any changes to JPS guaranteed standards and NWC guaranteed standards, as well as to find out about the customer satisfaction areas such as service quality. And we also wanted to determine the levels of satisfaction and dissatisfaction there is with how the operators communicate with consumers. Overall, we wanted the 2020 Mystery Shopping Survey to ensure that the utility providers have, one, put measures in place to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 when their customers visit their offices, and two, taken corrective measures to address the weak areas that were identified in the last survey. COVID-19 posed some challenges in getting the survey completed on time, as the new normal changed the dynamics of the survey in that the questions were modified to adjust to the services that were offered at the utility providers' offices, as well as what were now being done online and via WhatsApp. The OUR continues to receive numerous complaints via its consumer affairs units, and so we are here this afternoon to ascertain if the providers have made improvements in reaching the 70% target that we set for them in 2018-2019. We again acquired the services of Market Research Services Limited to get an unbiased perspective on the service delivery. I now invite Mrs. Kishka K. Anderson, Chief Executive Officer, Market Research Services Limited, to share the findings of 2020. Kishka?
Thank you, Bev, and welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. Market Research Services Limited, we're delighted to share with you the results of the recently concluded Mystery Shopper 2020 study. I will be sharing my screen now. Okay, so thank you. So here we will be sharing with you the the results from the mystery shopping. I will begin by just quickly giving you an overview of what we did. Beverly has already alluded to it, but the methodology really it represents an anonymous customer's experience using different modalities. And by that we mean their in-store visits, telephone calls to call centers, online chats. We simulated many different scenarios so that the experience would be real to life and not give any inkling that we were there as mystery shoppers. And what we actually investigated, inquiring about obtaining a new meter in the case of JPS and NWC, bill queries and payment plans in the case of JPS and NWC. And we also inquired about internet and the number portability for the telecoms. Specific locations of the different service providers were contacted twice using each of the modalities mentioned above for a total of 143 contacts across all 4 service providers. We did one visit during the peak period, and the peak period is typically tied to the pay date of the 25th of the month of the current month to the 10th of the following month. And we also did one visit in the off-peak period, which would be from the 11th to about the 24th. Why we did this? We wanted to simulate different experiences at different times because we recognize that the service delivery might vary depending on the time of month that the shopper goes in. What was the period of investigation? Much longer than we typically do. It spanned from September 2020 to January 2021, and I will share with you in a little while why that was so. Just to assure you, in terms of our quality control measures, we are big on quality, especially for a study of this nature. All our studies, but indeed this one, we make sure that the shoppers included both males and females. So we would control for any gender biases in the experience. We also ensure that we had a mix of different ages from adulthood to the retirement ages. So we had many different customers reflecting the range of the customers of the different providers. No single shopper was allowed to visit the same location more than once. This was to ensure that there were no relationships built and again to control for biases that could occur because of repeat visits. The tool we used to record the shopper's experience was an electronic one, which pushed out all the relevant questions needed to complete the report of their experience. So there was no guessing or spelling on the part of the shopper what they needed to answer. Shopping was done across different days of the week and different times of the day during the study period, again, to control for any biases that could emerge due to time of day or day of week visits. We did experience some challenges and limitations with this particular survey, and this was primarily due to the COVID-19 pandemic. What were they? Well, because there were closures of stores during the study period, we were very unsure. So we would turn up to a store to discover that they were closed. So this led to some challenges in executing field. There was also an increased level of difficulty in gaining access inside some of the stores. Depending on the nature of the service that was required, customers were diverted to other service modalities such as online or telephone. And so what that meant is that data collection had to be halted for us to relook and reconsider what were the scenarios we were shopping, and this led to an overall delay in the mystery shopping exercise. Okay, I'm going to go right into the findings now, just by giving you an overview of what we found. And here we're just summarizing the overall performance scores obtained by each of the 4 service providers that we shopped. Flow achieved an overall score of 70%, Digicel 68%, JPS 76%, and NWC came out the winner this year with an overall score of 80%. Across all service providers, the average score obtained was 74%. And this is in-store, call center, and online chats combined. So we just wanted to share with you what was the results, peak and off-peak. Not much of a difference at all in the service delivery, whether we visited just right after pay period or sometime after. The service delivery were pretty much the same, except we should point out that NWC delivered far better service in the off-peak period than it did in the peak period. So now just to pull out of those overall scores what was the in-store experience like. And here we're giving you the results across all 4 service providers. NWC again, the winner with 71% score in terms of its in-store delivery, followed behind by JPS 66%. Flow was third at 59% and Digicel 57% for an overall score across all service providers of 63%. So what about the call center experience? Well, all service providers overall service providers delivered a much better customer experience in the call center than in store for an average score of 76%. However, let us see how we did by each provider. Well, JPS stood out with 89% overall score in call center. NWC was second at 86%. Flow 67%, and Digicel 63%. What of online chat? And this was by far the best performing service modality, achieving an overall score across all providers of 88%. The most outstanding in the online chat experience was NWC, achieving an almost perfect score, 98%, followed behind by Digicel, 91%, Flow, 85%, and JPS at 77%. So let us look at COVID measures in store, a very important criteria, understandably, given the season that we're in. We wanted to see how were the service providers delivering or performing in this particular area. Overall, an average performance score of 72% across all service providers. However, JPS stood out the winner in this area with 80% score, followed behind by NWC, 74%, then Digicel, 68%, and Flow at 66%. These scores are just represent the summary, the overall performance scores across the 4 areas, major areas of the study. Because we're now in our 3rd year, we are able to now begin to develop a trend in performance. And what we're showing you here is the performance of the different providers from the first time we did the study in 2018 to 2020. And what this trend chart is showing is that all service providers reported improvement right across the board, some more than others. In fact, NWC reports the largest percentage increase in terms of its service score. I would like to point out, however, that the online chat service experience is what is the driver behind this change, this positive change. When we look at the results, if we should compare apples with apples, meaning looking at 2018, 2019, and 2020 without the online chat experience, the results actually look somewhat different. In that, if we should take out the scores obtained in online chat rooms, what you would have found is that Flow would have made no improvement since 2019 with an overall average score of about 63%. We would have seen Digicel down, not significantly, but by just 1 percentage point, 2 percentage points, my apologies, from 62% in 2019 to 60%. JPS would have gained 2 percentage points, and NWC would have been up by 12 percentage points. So it's very important when we're looking at this trend chart to keep in mind that we have introduced in 2020 a new modality online that was not factored for in the 2 previous years. And this is the chart. Let me just go. I'm going to share with you now some detailed findings. And how I've presented this is in 2 main blocks. We're going to be looking at the telecoms versus the utility service providers. And for this presentation, I'm considering utility service providers, NWC and JPS. So let's look at how the telecoms performed in each of the areas that we investigated. Beginning with customer service in store. The red bars represent Digicel and the blue bars represent Flow. And what we're seeing, you can see where Flow and Digicel are pretty close in some areas, but there are aspects, service areas in which Digicel wins, and in other areas where Flow came out the winner. So let's just go through each of the elements to the extreme left of the chart. So we asked the shopper, were you acknowledged by a representative upon entering the store? And what we see is that Digicel was outstanding, almost a perfect score, 96% compared to Flow at 81%. And were you greeted by the representative when you entered the store? Almost even in terms of the scores achieved, not much separating the two providers. Digicel 82%, Flow 84%, but let us highlight that Flow leads by 2 percentage points in that area. Were you given undivided attention as a customer when you were in the store? Digicel leads 93% to Flow 90%. And what about respect and manner displayed by the representative? Did you feel respected? Well, both providers almost achieved an equal score, 96%, 97%, Digicel and Flow respectively. What about delivering exceptional service according to the shopper's own desires of what would they consider exceptional service? And none of the providers really was regarded as delivering exceptional service. However, Flow nudged out just a little bit more than Digicel, 19% compared to Digicel's 11%. Was the service experience closed with a pleasant comment by the representative? Well, in the case of Digicel, not as much as Flow, 70% for Digicel compared to Flow, 80%, 84%. And how was the professional attire of the staff on your visit? Well, Digicel 58%, Flow 55%. Not much separating the two providers in that regard, but Digicel has the edge. And finally, did the rep give you or inspire confidence? Did they have knowledge about what you were sharing or what you requested? And Digicel stood out 93% compared to Flow 87%. Let's see how they perform now in terms of facilities. And this looks at the physical space itself. There are some areas that we specifically measured, and we asked the shoppers to just tell us what did they see and what was their experience. Well, we asked about, was there comfortable seating provided for customers when you visited? Well, in the case of Digicel, 56% said yes, 48% said yes for Flow. What about provisions for persons with special needs? Was that evident? Not much really among any of the telecoms. However, Flow stood out marginally more in this area, 16% compared to Digicel, 11%. What about the cleanliness of floors, walls, and counters? Well, both providers were definitely strong in this area, with Digicel receiving full marks, 100% in this regard, and Flow almost full marks at 97%. And in terms of the prominence of promotional plans, well, Digicel was definitely more outstanding in this regard, 67% score and 32% compared to 32% for Flow. What of the call center experience? If you look at this chart, again, remembering that Digicel represents the red bars, we see that there are instances where just about the two providers received perfect scores in some instances. And then we saw where they fell back in others. So we're just going to go through each of them. My apologies, it shifted. Did the representative answer with his name? Well, in all cases that we called, Digicel representative did so 100% of the times compared to Flow 84% of the times. Was the tone with which the phone was answered a warm, welcoming, pleasant one? Always in the case of Digicel, only sometimes in the case of Flow, 100% compared to 83%. But what about identifying the name of the department? Nothing separating the two providers, 67% each in this regard. Courtesy throughout the conversation. So was the representative courteous and pleasant throughout the conversation? Well, 100% of the times that we spoke in the call center for Digicel, yes. 83% of the times in the case of Flow. Correctly transferring you, and this was an optional question. There are times that we needed, the shopper might need, based on the request, there needed to be some transfer to another department. So we wanted to know, was that transfer correct? Well, in the case of Flow, 100% of the times. In the case of Digicel, sometimes, 75%. When you were being transferred, were you advised as to which department you would be transferred to? If that occurred, well, in the case of Digicel, 75% of the times, Flow, 67% of the times. What about the tone in which the phone was answered by the other staff who picked up the call when you had to be transferred? Well, that was very good, 100% of the times, full marks for Flow, 75% for Digicel. When they answered the phone, did they identify the department to which you were transferred? Well, certainly so in the case of Flow all the times, but 50% of the times in the case of Digicel? Were you advised before being placed on hold that you were going to be transferred? 83% for Flow, 67% for Digicel. Did the representative have knowledge? The person that you dealt with, did they inspire confidence and give you the impression that they were knowledgeable about what you had called about? In the case of Flow, 100%, Digicel, 83%. And finally, what about the courtesy, the manner in which they closed the call? Was courtesy exercised at that point? 100% of the times for Digicel, 92% of the times for Flow. The final service modality we checked was online chats, and this was done via the web browser typically, but we also investigated WhatsApp chat in the case of Flow because this was available. And so these are the questions that we asked them. Keep in mind, this is the first time that we're tracking this service modality. Were you able to access the chat rooms easily? Oops, my apologies, the numbers are off on this variable, but I'll just share in terms of the trend. We're seeing that Digicel Flow was outstanding, more outstanding than Digicel in this particular area. Appear to be talking with a real person while you were on the web chat. Well, again, Flow was more outstanding than Digicel. Seems like 100% compared to 83%. What about, were you pleased? How was the experience? Was it pleasant on the web chat? Both providers seem to have performed at a similar level. It looks like at about 100%, no difference there. Knowledge of the representative online, pretty much the same for both providers. What about the greeting? When they greeted you in the web chat, did they include their name? Well, certainly so, always in the case of Digicel, but not always in the case of Flow. What about courtesy throughout the conversation, even in that text environment or that web chat environment? More so for Flow than Digicel. Promptly, were they prompt in the responses that they provided? Did they have to wait a long while? Did they feel that they were fully engaged in the web chat experience? For both providers, definitely yes. Fully 100% of the times. And were they able to provide the information that they requested? Yes. 100% of the times. So as you can see from the online chat experience, the scores were very high, 80% and above, and this has driven the overall performance score in the 2020 Mystery Shopping Survey. What about number portability? This was an aside that we asked about. Well, what in terms of the telecoms? Were they able to explain the process for number portability? Both service providers were fully able to do so. Were they able to advise about the cost that would be associated in the case of Digicel? Yes, they did advise about the cost. In the case of no cost, my apologies, there's no cost. In the case of Flow, 83% of the times. Did they advise of the length of time it would take for the number to be transferred? 50% equally for both Digicel and Flow. The other times, no. Were the questions about hidden costs and charges answered? And these were specific questions that we asked the shopper to ask. In the case of Digicel, 100% of the times, yes. In the case of Flow, only 50% of the times. Now to the COVID-19 measures, just to share with you exactly what we investigated on our visit. We wanted to know, was there visible social distance markers? Well, 90% for Flow, 89% for Digicel, almost equal. Observed, were the markers, the social distance markers being observed by customers? 100% of the times with Digicel, 86% for Flow. Were there monitors, persons assigned to observe customers during this environment to ensure that they were actually obeying the measures implemented? 96% for Digicel, 88% for Flow. Was mask required upon entry? Interestingly, all of our visits, 100% for Digicel, but there are instances when this was not obvious for Flow, 94%. Was there an area for customers to sanitize upon entry? 96% Digicel, 94% Flow. What about temperature checks? Were these being done? 67% Digicel, 68% Flow, almost equal, but not 100%. Were agents wearing masks? 82% for Digicel, 77% for Flow. But what about the customer service area? Was it being sanitized after each customer had removed from the spot? Well, 11% for Digicel, 29% for Flow. This was not a very common measure, but we should remember that this isn't mandated by the Ministry of Health, but it is something that we've noted that some providers are offering, and we tested it. Sanitation done while in store. Did you notice any sanitation being done while in store? Not really. In fact, Digicel none of the visits were made. Digicel was noted as doing that, but in 9% of the cases, Flow was. Was there any obvious changes to the layout of the store? Were you able to visibly see that the stores made some adjustments? Again, this was not mandatory, so we have to be very careful how we look at this score. But in the case of Digicel, they said yes, 37% score in that regard, where there were obvious changes to the infrastructure to facilitate observance of the COVID-19 measures, compared to 29% for Flow. And that takes us to the end of the telecoms. We will now go to utilities, and by utilities, we mean NWC and JPS. And let's see how these two providers performed in the area of customer service. Starting again, acknowledgement of by a rep on arrival of the store. Were you acknowledged by a representative? Well, more so in the case of NWC than JPS, 71% compared to 53%. What about greeting by the representative? Not much of a difference. However, NWC still stood out marginally more, 86% compared to 82%. Were you given undivided attention by the representative when you were being serviced? 100% for JPS, 64% for NWC. What about the respect given to you and the manner displayed by the representative? Well, 100% full marks for NWC and an excellent 93% score for JPS. In terms of delivery of exceptional service, according to what the shopper considered exceptional service, well, we found that 29% NWC, 13%, 18% JPS, but both below that 30% mark. Not a major exceptional services were seen. No major exceptional services were observed, my pardon. What about a pleasant closing comment after you were serviced? Well, not much of a difference between the two providers, but JPS stood out marginally ahead, 87% compared to 85%. The professional attire of staff. JPS stood out meaningfully ahead of NWC, 89% compared to 69%. Knowledge of the representative. Did they inspire confidence? Were they able to answer your questions? 86% in the case of NWC, 82% for JPS. What about the ability to address your queries regarding your bill? Certainly more so in the case of NWC, but significantly so also in the case of JPS, 100% compared to 94%. And were you able to establish a payment plan? Definitely so in the case of NWC, but not so in the case of JPS. Let's now move to facilities of these service providers. Again, we begin by looking at the seating provided. Was there comfortable seating in the facilities in the store when you went? More so for JPS, but not so much for NWC, 82%, 64%. Were there provisions for persons with special needs? 57% NWC, 29% JPS. What about the cleanliness and stocking of the restroom of the items that customers would need? 75% NWC, 50% for JPS. In terms of the cleanliness of floors, walls, and counters, JPS achieved a full score, full marks, 100% compared to NWC, 71%. And the visibility and accessibility of the guaranteed standards. This was more prominent and more noted at JPS, 88% compared to NWC, 77%. Let's see how they did in call center. Very good scores. If you look at the chart, you're seeing lots of 100% there, but we did have a few 50%, and we're just going to look at those. Answering by name, both providers, excellent scores, full marks. Tone with which the phone was answered, both providers, full marks, 100% each. Now we begin to see some changes in the character of this chart, and that started with identification of the name of the department when the phone was answered. Both providers fell down in this area compared to the two previous areas we investigated. However, JPS did better in this area, 83%, than NWC at 67%. Courtesy throughout the conversation, JPS 100%, NWC 83%. Still a good mark, but not when JPS is at 100%. It doesn't look that good. Correctly transferring of call, if the call needed to be transferred, both service providers 100%. Advisory of the department that you would be transferred to, were you told about this? Certainly in the case of NWC, but not always in the case of JPS. What about the tone in which the phone was answered by the staff to whom you were transferred to? Both service providers received full marks in that area. Did the person who answered the phone after being transferred identify themselves by name? Well, certainly so, always in the case of JPS, but only sometimes in the case of NWC. And what about informing you that you are going to be placed on hold before they transferred you? Did the service providers do that? There was nothing separating the two service providers. They achieved equal scores in this regard, 67%. Knowledge of the representative to whom you were transferred to, were they knowledgeable? Yes, fully so for both NWC and JPS. And finally, in terms of the courtesy, that closing remark, that I valued your call today. Did they deliver that? Both providers equally at 83%. Let's see how they did in the online chat rooms. Well, we're seeing 100% almost always in the case of NWC, except for one area, but JPS fell down in some cases in just about all the areas here. The scores are almost evenly distributed across all the areas that we investigated for both providers. Let's begin by accessing the chat room easily. Were you able to do so? Certainly in the case of JPS, all the times that we went on, but in the case of, NWC, all the times that we went on, but in the case of JPS, 83% of the times. Did it appear as though you were talking to a real person? Certainly all the times in the case of NWC, 83% for JPS. Were you pleased with your overall online experience? Definitely in the case of NWC, mostly so in the case of JPS, 83%. What about the representative knowledge in the online chat? Well, NWC definitely, full marks 100%, JPS 83%. Greeting, did they include their name when they greeted you in the web chat? Always for NWC, 83% in the case of JPS. Was there courtesy displayed throughout the conversation? Always in the case of NWC, 67% for JPS. And what about the promptness in which they responded to your questions while in that space? 83% for NWC, the first time we're seeing where the NWC did not achieve full marks in this area, and 50% in the case of JPS. And finally, was the information that you requested or the purpose of your online contact, did you achieve that successfully? 100% in the case of NWC, 83% for JPS. Now let's look to how they did in terms of the COVID-19 measures, and this would specifically be with the in-store visits. Were social distance markers notable? Almost equal, the same score almost for both providers, 93% NWC, 94% JPS. Were the distance markers being observed by customers? More so in NWC than at JPS, 92%, 88%. Was there someone assigned to observe customers in store, making sure that the protocols were being adhered to? Both providers, fully so. Was mask required upon entry? Both providers, fully so. Was there an area for the customer to sanitize upon entry? Always in the case of JPS, mostly in the case of NWC, 100%, 93%. Was temperature check being done on entry? Always in the case of JPS, 86% for NWC. Did the agents wear masks while you were in the store? 88% JPS, 71% NWC. Was the customer service area sanitized after each customer left the space? Again, not a mandatory requirement. 59% JPS, 29% NWC. Did you notice any sanitization being done while in store for both providers? None. And were there any obvious changes to the layout, infrastructural changes to the layout of the store to facilitate COVID-19, adherence to the COVID-19 measures? And both providers achieved an equal score, 71%. And that takes me to the end of the detailed results for the utility service providers. I'll just wrap up this presentation with some concluding remarks and recommendations from Market Research Services Limited. So what would we conclude from the results that we shared? Well, all service providers reported an improvement in performance between 2019 and 2020. And this was largely due to the performance in the online chat service modality. However, if you should take that out, you would realize that NWC really was reported the greatest improvement overall by 12 percentage points between 2019 and 2020. I just think it's very important for us to know that. Service providers' performance in the online chat, as I said before, is responsible for the improved scores reported. There needs to be some attention given to the service delivery in stores. This continues to be a challenge for just about all the service providers. This is where all service providers performed weakest. Again, in 2020, we saw that in 2019, we saw that in 2018, and it still maintains today. With regards to the telecoms, their service delivery in terms of internet needs to be the area of focus. And why we say this, when we inquired about internet availability, do you have any idea when it will be available? There was very little response in that regard. The telecoms could not say, especially in a time like this where we recognize that online experience is what customers are relying on. Internet has become a commodity. Even more so, we figure that this is somewhere that the telecoms really have to focus their attention. Specifically, CSRs need to be equipped with answering questions regarding the time frame or even if the service will become available in their area. Consistently, they fell down in that regard. In the case of the utilities, and by this I mean JPS and NWC, access to managers and supervisors when needed ought to be the area of focus. There were instances where we requested that and we just did not get the chance to speak with a manager or supervisor. Performance in the area of offering payment plans to customers by the utilities also underperformed when compared to other areas. Services for the disabled need to be looked into by all service providers. However, the utilities, that is in particular JPS and NWC, really need to look more into this area. They underperformed meaningfully compared to the telecoms. Performance by the utilities in terms of their call center delivery recorded an improvement over 2019 and ought to be maintained. Thank you very much. That takes us to the end of our presentation. We now open the floor for any questions. Over to you,
Thank
Madam.
you very much, Kishka. Very informative and very instructive results that we're seeing coming out of the 2020 survey findings. If you're just joining us either via YouTube or Facebook, you are watching our webinar, the Office of Utilities Regulations webinar, where we just unveiled the findings of our 2020 mystery shopping survey, where we looked at various points of contacts for customers of the utility companies. How did they perform? Well, we're seeing in summary that we actually looked at 4 different areas. We looked at the in-store areas of the utilities, their online chat, their customer service call centers, and we also look at the COVID measures that they had employed. And you just heard Kishka really going into detail about it. So we're taking your questions. You can post your questions either on the YouTube platform or the Facebook platform. We'll get them and we'll post them to Beverly Green from the OUR, as well as Kishka K. Anderson from Market Research Services Limited, and they were contracted by the OUR to conduct this very detailed study. And as Kishka K explained, they had 143 contacts, um, whether in person or online, and they actually made contact at each point at least twice, and they employed their agents to go during the off-peak as well as on-peak times, as well as during the times of, when payday and we're paying our bills, so the 25th to the 10th of the month, and then they also made contact in the middle of the month as well. So they got a reasonably good experience and understanding of exactly what was happening and what was your experience when you made contact with the utility companies. Kishka, one of the things that jumped out at me is that when we looked at the four areas that we really delved into, the in-store, the online chat, the call centers, and COVID measures, I'm finding that invariably JPS and NWC, or should I say NWC and JPS are topping those areas, but not the telecoms. In store, it was NWC, then JPS, first and second, telephone, contact, call centers, JPS, NWC, chat was NWC and Digicel, and in the case of the COVID measures, JPS and NWC, and overall, it was NWC and JPS. I'm not seeing the telecoms coming out in the top two at all. What do you think accounted for that?
Well, clearly, when you look at the results for the telecoms, we see where they're falling down. The research is very clear. Their in-store service delivery needs much to be desired. And I think in particular, what is clear, the internet delivery, the internet experience really pulled down the providers, the telecoms on this occasion. Their ability to provide answers to customers about internet service, when will it be available, if it will be available, they really fell down in that area. And that's what the telecoms need to focus on going forward.
You pointed to the low marks that really all of them got, because the highest was, I think, 57% in terms of provisions for persons with special needs. So I think if my data is correct, Flow performed at 16%, Digicel at 11%, NWC at 57%, and JPS at 29%. When we're talking about provisions for persons with special needs, what are we talking about?
Okay, so the things that we typically look for, are there any special lines for them? Is there a ramp for them to get in and out of the building? Infrastructural as well as service delivery. And we're seeing consistently since 2018, this has been an issue where the providers are not making exceptional or special areas, special service areas for persons with special needs.
Yeah. Beverly, let me turn to you. The performance level, as we've seen, the outstanding performer in this time is the NWC. But what percentage will the OUR find acceptable in terms of performance level by the utility companies, Beverly?
Ideally, Liz, we would want there to be a satisfaction rate of 100%. However, we know that this is not possible. The international benchmark is about 80%, so we will consider that to be acceptable at this time.
Yeah. Have we discussed the findings with the utility companies there?
Yes, we have. We have met with them collectively and shared the major findings with them, and we have also sent portions of the findings to their companies.
Yeah. Kishka, you spoke earlier in your presentation about the peculiarities that your agents would have found in light of COVID. Would you think that this impacted the results at all?
Not really. Well, we saw the areas where they certainly fell down, and I think we need to remember that some of the things that we investigated were not mandated by the Ministry of Health. Certainly, in terms of the measures mandated by the Ministry of Health, the providers did mostly well. I was particularly surprised, though, I must say, in terms of that mask wearing on entry, where we saw where there were instances where it was not a requirement. And that particularly surprised us. We actually checked and checked to make sure those results were so. But I don't think the COVID measures in and of itself impacted the scores. It's really the customer service delivery in store. That is where they fell down.
Yeah. one of the surprising thing, well, I wouldn't say surprising for us here at the OUR, but still concerning at the OUR is a low performance of in-store experience by your agents. This is concerning for us, and I know that you highlighted it as part of your recommendation for improvement. But what do you think contributed to that, Kishka K? Why is it that we're seeing this low performance in stores? It's not the first year we're seeing it compared to the other platforms.
Right. And indeed, when we look at the performance 2019 to 2020, we're not seeing much of a difference.
Not much of a difference.
No, not much of a difference, except in the case of NWC, where we
And
saw a
obviously, that
12%
yes, that
improvement.
was
So
the difference.
kudos
That was
to
the difference.
NWC, well
Yes,
done. But
yes.
not much of a difference with the other the
In fact, for
telecoms.
Flow, I think you said there was no improvement for Flow. There was a 1% drop for Digicel and a 2% improvement for JPS. So,
Right.
both only NWC really was the shining star in that area.
Correct. And it's very important to let the audience know that we ask specific questions, and we've been asking these questions since 2018. So the shopper is told to say, did this happen, yes or no? We try to control for some subjectivity in the evaluation. So we say, did they greet you on approaching the store? Was there pleasant courtesy? Was there even courtesy when you were approached by a rep? So there are specific things that we ask for, and the results is very clear where the service providers constantly fall down.
Yeah. Bev, will we be posting the findings today?
Yes, Liz, we will be issuing a media release on the major findings, and this will be posted on our website and on our social media pages. And the slide presented by Kishka will also be posted on our website today.
So for persons who may be wondering, who are viewing via YouTube and our Facebook pages, how will we be utilizing these findings? Because a lot of work went into it by Market Research Services Limited, a lot of effort. The findings are very, very detailed. And I know that the OUR really put the findings to good use. Share with us, Bev, how we'll be using them.
Well, each year we host a quality of service symposium with the large utility providers and the small providers. So the findings from the mystery shopping surveys are used in developing the code of practice, which is also adopted by the utility providers.
Yes. And for the purpose of our viewers, the code of practice for complaints handling, or COP, I would call it, is really an effective guide in helping to resolve a complaint before it becomes worse. And it sets out the process for how the complaints should be handled at each stage of the complaint handling process. And we know that we have gotten very, very good cooperation from the utilities. In fact, through our quality of service symposium that you mentioned, Bev, it is through that the utilities also make their inputs in terms of the development and finalization of the code of practice,
That's right.
for which we're very
That's
grateful.
correct, Liz.
Yeah.
Yes.
One question is coming in from our platform is, what is considered sanitization in stores? There was some sanitization at a customer service area. What is it? Let me see. There was some sanitization of the customer service area after each customer, but no sanitization in store. Fishka, I think they're asking to make that distinction, because we did say yes, sanitization in store, but we did not see it at certain points. Maybe you could clarify that.
Okay, thanks for that question. So we are sanitization at two levels. Were you required to sanitize on entry? Was there a sanitization station upon entry? That is a requirement. I believe it's one of the MOH requirements, sanitizing upon entry. And then we asked, there are some service providers that actually sanitize counters. So once you've moved away from a particular counter, you usually have representatives, staff representatives going and cleaning off those surfaces, making it clean for the next customer. We also asked that. That's not a mandatory, that's not mandated by the MOH. So we asked at the two levels.
Right. Thanks for that clarification. It's good that that question was asked, because we wanted to have that clarified as well. Ladies, I want to thank you so much for being a part of this. We hope that we were able to inform our viewers about the findings. We will be posting the findings, as Beverly said, on our website so you can browse it at your convenience. If you know someone who may want to watch this video afterwards, please invite them to do so. It will remain on our YouTube platform as well as on our Facebook platform. We invite you to like our pages and subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can be the first to get the latest news coming out of the Office of Utilities Regulation. I want to thank Kishka K. Anderson, who is the CEO for Market Research Services Limited, who conducted our survey, for really participating in our panel discussion, our webinar today, and just talking about the findings. Thank you so much, Kishka.
You're welcome.
And Beverly Green was the project manager from the OUR who handled the mystery shopping project. We want to thank you, Bev. In her substantive job, she is a consumer affairs officer. Gordon Brown was our producer for this webinar. Thank you so much, Gordon. Well done, well done. And of course, we got technical support from Play Media. I am Elizabeth Bennett Marsh. Continue to stay safe until next time. Good day. Okay, thank you, ladies.
You're off now.
Should be off.
You're off.
We should be off, yes.
Okay, okay.
Yannick, just give us the indication that we are off.
Okay, okay. All right.
Thank you very much. Take care,
All right.
ladies.
Thanks,
Bye.
Thank you
guys.
very much,
Thank
everybody.
you,
Well done.
Bye-bye.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Much appreciated.
You're seeing this on the right? Oh, wow.
They're still talking.
Nobody ever left. No, I'm the only person left in this chatting. Everybody else left.